Welcome to the Martin Bailey Photography Podcast. It's June 9, 2019, and this is episode 664. This week I share a chat with my friend Don Komarechka about his awesome macro work and his upcoming crowdfunded book. Don is an incredibly talented photographer and probably the only photographer I know that is geekier than I am when it comes to diving into the details. There's no shortage of geekiness in our chat either, and although I won't transcribe the conversation for the blog, I have posted some of Don's beautiful macro photographs on the blog at mbp.ac/644 for you to check out and follow along with as we talk. And of course, if you're listening on a device that can show the images in chapters, then even the MP3 audio should have some of these images embedded for you. However, I have also put a gallery of images of photographs of Don's new book and links to the Kickstarter that has literally just gone live as I prepare this podcast before I leave for Namibia on June 1st. So do head over to the blog and check out the links for the Kickstarter program that has just started and Don's amazing work. Okay, so here is my conversation with Don Komarechka. Don, welcome to the show. It's been a while. Lovely to see you.
It has been. Thank you for having me back on your show, Martin. I mean, I have you on my podcast periodically, so it's great that we can kind of cross-pollinate like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's been too long since you've been on here, and I think in the meanwhile, I've been on your show about 3 times. And I did want to quickly mention, for the listeners, if you think that I get a bit geeky sometimes, I'll put some weird stuff behind some of my episodes. Check out Don's. It's photogeekweekly.com, and Don has some amazing stuff on there. I mean, pretty much everything is, but he is a wonderful photographer. And what we're going to do today is, Don has a book coming up, and we were going to talk a little bit about that, but more. I've selected 3 of Don's amazing macro photographs, and we're going to dive in and take a look at that and talk about what, the story behind them, but also just let it, we'll go off the rails and talk about all sorts of other geeky stuff as we go through. Tell us, Don, before we jump into looking at your photographs, what are you up to these days?
Well, just off air before we started recording, I mentioned I was building a fence outside in the backyard because, we have award-winning gardens here. And actually, a lot of the images, all of them were taken in my backyard. Wow. So we try to keep that as pretty and beautiful as possible. In fact, I've been spending thousands of dollars a year putting bulbs and new interesting plants that can survive in our climate here to have as much biodiversity as possible in a small space, which is great for a number of things. Number one, if I'm out there taking pictures, the variety is nonstop. Every minute of the growing season, you've got something new happening, and it's really exciting. And I do workshops there with students too, so they have the benefit of that as well. Yeah. And I have a 3-year-old daughter that likes our koi pond, is fascinated with the fish, and so building a fence around that was priority number 1 as soon as things warmed up. So wearing a lot of different hats, but it all kind of boils back to photography in the end.
Yeah, it's amazing. I know I'm envious in many ways. I know people that have, they'll set up bird tables. I was communicating with a person that is going to be joining one of my future workshops yesterday, and he was talking about how he had an owl sit in his garden for an hour the other night. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, here in Tokyo, I mean, there are huge benefits to being here, and I love where I live, but I don't have a garden. I have a little balcony that's like a meter deep. I can't even really put a picnic table out there. And it's too hot in the summer anyway. So I'm sort of envious of anyone that's got a decent sized garden and that is able to have wildlife. And I mean, you obviously, some of the photos today we're going to be talking about, you have insects in them. I can get to insects, but it means sort of heading out and going around somewhere. and I often just don't prioritize that sort of work. So I absolutely envy you having that. But of course, yeah, important stuff. Build that fence around your pond. We don't want your daughter floating around in there. And it's nice to actually hear more about the sort of the personal Don, because obviously we talk a lot and I get to see what you're doing online, but sort of jumping into the psyche and just like Daddy Don getting his stuff together, and it's nice.
Well, yeah, yeah, and it was interesting because we bought this house 4 years ago. It's our fifth summer here,
Mm.
and I was not a gardener before this. I mean, I
Mm.
had very little interest in actually maintaining something like that, and we purchased this house that already had award-winning perennial gardens.
Mm.
And I was thinking to myself, "Oh, expletive! What am I going to do with all of this stuff?" And in a few short years, I've turned myself into an amateur horticulturalist, and
Yeah.
especially with some of the work that I do with certain flowers that will fluoresce.
Mm.
Just last night, I was walking around in the garden at night with an ultraviolet flashlight, pointing it at different things I saw during the day to see if something interesting happens
Yeah.
within that. It's
Yeah.
always kind of a what if game with me. Down
Yeah.
the rabbit hole you go. You never know what almost magical surprise you're going to come across,
Yeah.
and that keeps me passionate about the work that I do.
Yeah.
Macro photography it has a lot of frustrations.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. There's a lot of randomness and chaos that you have to overcome. But it's always kind of a sense of discovery,
Yeah.
which is why it's become such a big part of my portfolio, because photography is discovery for me.
Yeah.
It's the unseen world. It's astrophotography. It's infrared photography. It's all the stuff that I can't see with my own eyes that just kind of lets me have fun.
Yeah. Well, before we move on, then let's quickly talk about the project. You sent me to you asked a little bit of advice on the cover of your book the other night, and this is something that you're putting together, and you're going to be crowdfunding it, right?
Yeah, so crowdfunding is the way that I had produced Sky Crystals, my book on snowflakes, which
Mm.
I believe you might have a copy
Yes,
of.
I have. Thank you very much, and we
And
talked about it too.
we did on a previous episode, and that was a 300-page hardcover book, and it was only possible to produce because people basically pre-ordered a copy.
Yeah.
Made sure that I had the funds to go through a press run, and then I sat down and produced the book. So this is the same process, and I learned so much from the first one. So many mistakes were made that just about completely derailed the project, and those mistakes won't happen again. So if you want, maybe you could find a link in the show notes and bring that one back up, because it would be a timely episode to
Will do.
re-listen to if you're
Yeah.
curious. But so this is not my first time doing it, but this is a much more diverse subject matter than just snowflakes. It's going to cover everything in the macro world, from gear and technique, how you light, how you shoot, that all the different subjects that you could imagine. And we've got 3 completely different subjects to talk about today.
Yeah.
And it comes down to the funds, right? I mean, it's going to be at now a 350 something page hardcover book, the same size or bigger than the one that I had produced previously. So there's a huge risk for somebody such as myself. I am basically the publisher at that point.
Yeah.
To say, well, if I don't hit the right numbers, I can't produce the book.
Yeah.
It's just an all or nothing sort of thing, because if you don't want to spend like $30,000 out of pocket in order to produce something that might not reach that return on investment in short order.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Are you using the same publisher, the same printers that you used before?
No, and that's one of the big changes,
Okay.
because they made good in the end, but they made some big problems to begin with. They didn't recommend that I print the book on a sheet-fed press versus a web press, and it caused all of the pages in the book to ripple, which made it look like water damage, and the entire first print run had to be scrapped.
I remember that.
And long story short, we fixed it. We did another print run, and it was costly, but we got there. The new printer that I'm using is out in Manitoba, more of a central province in Ontario. and Friesens is their name. And I've gotten quotes from a number of people. They're competitive. They printed. I did a poster print of snowflakes that had over 400 separate snowflakes, all measured
I
and
remember
placed in
that. Yeah.
scale, and it was so much fun to have that as a finished piece because it took 2,500 hours to make. They printed the production run of that, and I got 2,000 copies of each, and they've been at retail and they've done well for me, and I was happy with their results. So they won me over for this next project.
Yeah, that trust is important. It's very valuable from both sides. From them for them to know that that they have impressed you to the point where you're going to go back to them, and for yourself just to have a relationship with a company or a service provider that you can trust from a business perspective or even on a personal level. I think it's very important.
When you get on a first name basis with somebody at a company and you have discussions back and forth, and I've done this with a lot of companies professionally, stuff that they've made custom mats for frames for me, and with like die cut stamps and things like that. They also made some greeting cards for me. This is a different company, but they impressed me, and I throw ideas at them randomly, and they said, "Yes, we can do that." No, but we know somebody who can. Go talk to these guys, and their opinion then becomes quite valuable for me.
Yeah.
So you want to nurture those relationships in business as best you can, and make new ones. So long as you start with smaller projects to build up the trust. That was that poster print project.
Yeah.
They succeeded there, and I'm coming back.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I know that you also do great workshops with people, and the repeat customer is also a nice vote of confidence for someone in business. If you turn up on a tour, I have some of my tours where 20, 30, sometimes as much as 50% of in fact more sometimes, but not usually more than 40 or 50% are repeat customers. They're people that are coming back for a second helping. And that, I think, also shows that they obviously didn't have a bad time on the first one, or they did and they need to fix it. but I think
but they
that's
know
the
you
thing.
can fix it,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And I was teaching a Photoshop course at my local college for a number of years. I've stopped doing it now, but I taught. It was like a 6-week course. I taught it maybe 5 or 6 times. And one guy, Jeff, he came back 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, wow.
It's the exact same course. And the third time I'm saying, Jeff, why are you coming back? It's like, well, you're teaching similar techniques, but every time you do it, you use different images. And so it's an entirely different experience. And yeah, I can always sharpen my skills, especially when it's a different environment. I love your instruction. Put me in a different scenario with you at the helm and I'm on board. So there's no greater compliment than those people.
Oh, absolutely. That's brilliant. So let's jump in and take a look at your 3 images. I'm going to pull up the first one. What I'm going to do, I will embed this in the post, but because I don't know what post it is, the post number is going to be yet, I will have given you the actual number to go to before we jumped into the conversation. But this will be on the web and you'll be able to go and check it out. So I've pulled up the first one of the bee with the blue eye. Tell us about this, Don. It's an amazing photo. I just love the otherworldly aspect, but it's just incredible. Tell us about it.
So when you picked this image, I was chuckling to myself because you probably didn't realize how far down the rabbit hole this image actually was. And so what we're seeing here is a sweat bee in some type of a cornflower. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but this is photographed out in my garden using exclusively ultraviolet light to illuminate this scene.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple of moving parts here. Number one, this needs to be photographed in complete darkness because if I have ambient light, for those that don't know, I've been doing a lot of ultraviolet fluorescence work, and it'll be in the book too, the whole soup to nuts idea. But if you hit a subject with pure ultraviolet light and it doesn't fluoresce, your camera captures nothing. There's nothing to capture.
Yeah.
But if some of that ultraviolet light hits the subject and bounces back in the visible spectrum, then your camera can capture that. And so this is what we're seeing here. we are seeing on a fairly cold late spring morning where the temperatures drop down into maybe 13 or 14 Celsius. These bees were just kind of resting in the flowers. They didn't have enough energy to
I
take
see.
off. So I was out picking the weeds in the garden, and I noticed this.
Yeah.
I drop everything, and I go out, into my studio and pulled like a giant piece of black felt
Yeah.
and some chairs so that I can set the chairs up and drape it over this flower so that I can create this little bit of darkness. Get the camera on a tripod, and uh, and and then the angle to get what we're seeing here was impossible to begin with,
Mm.
because the flower, you can see sort of the walls of the flower
Yeah.
in the background are all much taller than the frame.
Yeah.
So I'm I have to pull some petals out,
Mm.
and I don't want to pull the petals out directly because then I'm going to shake this bee and he might freak out and fly off.
Mm.
So then I run back inside. I need another ingredient. I need scissors.
Yeah.
I need to just cut the part of the flower off in the front so that I could see inside. But at that point, I'm taking a couple of test shots as you're just trying to gauge exposure and focus and all the things. You've got moving parts here, but the bee is not moving. It's
Mm.
actually looking quite lethargic in my test shots
Mm.
because it's so cold.
Yeah.
So I'm ready. The flashes are in place, the camera's in place, all of the ingredients, as best as I can juggle them, are going to align. But my bee kind of looks half dead
Yeah.
because he's so cold.
Yeah.
So then I just start breathing on the bee because the warmth of my breath
Yeah.
will warm him up, and
Yeah.
he's going to start moving around the flower a little bit more. And so, it's one problem-solving scenario after another when you're diving through these images in order
Yeah.
to create something useful. And so that was the final problem to solve. And then he started kind of wandering around a little bit. He's awake. He's starting to maybe eat some pollen. This bee, like in regular light,
Mm.
is like, this is a transformative view. He's got an iridescent green carapace almost everywhere,
Mm.
and some yellow stripes on his abdomen that are black in this image.
Yeah.
All of those colors don't give me anything from the fluorescence. His eyes, which are normally black, are glowing blue.
Yeah.
So this is like a mirror universe kind of
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
where everything is different, but it's in the same place. And so that's where you mentioned otherworldly. It's a great way to describe this kind of photography.
Mm.
It's the universe at our feet,
Mm.
which is kind of the subtitle of the book I'll be writing. And this image is kind of paramount to the adventures that you can get up to when you just put on that propeller hat and just geek out with your photography.
Mm.
And then you make something that somehow boils back down to the narratives that we can all relate to, even though it's so foreign.
Mm. You know, I had kind of guessed part of that, but your story is just so. I mean, it's not only entertaining; it's one of those. Geez, you are such a geek with this stuff, but that's why your work is so beautiful. And I've considered myself to be a good problem solver, and I've done lots of stuff. But if I had seen this, I know that the extent of my macro investigation would probably have been, okay, go and get the camera, point it down, see what you can get. And I probably would have made something about a quarter as good as this, just because I'm not that adventurous with macro, but also I don't think I wouldn't think of all of the stuff that you just went through. So, I mean, it's great that, you've developed these workflows over the years, and obviously
You don't just fall into this.
Exactly.
And of course, I photographed these bees in these same flowers. They love these flowers on the side of our house many times for years, ever since we've been here. And they're fascinating. They let you get close. You could even pet them if you really wanted to. They're oblivious to you. They have no bearing on you really being there.
Yeah.
But with their green colors, and the flower is normally a bright pink magenta color. So there's some nice color contrast with that in just plain old ordinary light. I photographed them constantly in those conditions in regular photography, and I've even experimented in 3D photography with these guys, and I've had a hoot with them.
Yeah.
And so once you've done that, That's your safety net,
Yeah.
right? Once you've explored that to the extent where you feel like it's not worth looking at again,
Yeah.
then you really get creative.
Yeah.
There was I forget the exact number, but there was a photographer teacher, professor at my local college, my alma mater. Even though I didn't graduate from the photography program, I do talk to these people. And one of the exercises that they gave their students was I forget the number, let's say 27 teacups, where
Mm.
you have to take 27 distinct photographs of the same plain white teacup.
Mm.
And so the first 10 probably come to you right away. And they're the least interesting, the least adventurous types of images. And then maybe the next 10 you're a little bit straining for, and they get to be a little bit more creative. You're taking a few more risks with it.
Mm.
And then the final 7 or however many end up being just so bizarrely beautiful and creative.
Mm.
Like I saw some of them in an exhibition where somebody's using a super soaker, like a water pistol filled with tea, spraying into the cup that's suspended by fishing line to just like create this really weird dynamic of it kind of floating and very energetic. And of course, the cup's breaking in some of the final shots and what have you. You can't get there
Yeah.
with your first attempt.
No.
You'll never arrive there unless you've exhausted the ideas.
Yeah.
So part of that learning process is just being there, doing the same thing multiple times until you get bored and realizing that there is still more to explore.
Yeah. And you know what I find, I mean, I'm sure you've heard a million times the old trick of either just leaving the house with a 50 millimeter or taping your 24-70 at 50 millimeters or some arbitrary number and then going out and learning from the restriction that imposes on you. And I think that's a great exercise in what it is. And people obviously learn from that. But I think that the next step of that and the extension of what you're saying here is that once you get to the point where you've developed those creative tools, you can take the tape off and you can still be that sort of, I call it ratcheted up. You know, you ratchet yourself up to the next level creatively. And if you're doing it right, the little tooth on the ratchet kicks in and you don't drop back down below that. So you take your new creative self into your future projects. And, you know, I mean, you are going to be, of course, everything new you do, you might have to drop back down again, but you're using the same thought processes that your new ratcheted up Martin or Don or whoever is working from. Do you find that?
I do. I could even I could translate that even farther because yeah, you're right about the 50 millimeter lens limitation or any
Mm.
focal length, you name
Mm.
it. Because as soon as you add a limiting factor, then it becomes challenging.
Yeah.
And as soon as it becomes challenging, it becomes creative.
Yeah.
And so whatever you can do to make your work more challenging, and I think that's really the hidden goal there, the more problem solving you're going to have to do. The more problem solving you do, the more inventive you are. The more inventive you are, the more creative you are. And that's kind of the flow for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the analytic mind is part of it. You know, being able to realize what you're looking at. Some of the tests that I do. I mean, I in my old day job before I ditched it all to become a full-time photographer and educator, whatever. I actually used to manage software test teams, and that was my job for 10 years, and it sort of helped me in many ways to figure out how to approach something to find out if it's either working correctly or if it's broken. But also you analyze things differently. And I think that I've not just that. I mean, probably the fact that the reason I was relatively good at that job is because of the me behind it. But I feel that some of the stuff that I'm doing in my studio now, like testing the printing capabilities of the EOS R as I did last week, and this week I was looking at the I got some ornaments out. I was going to pull them up to the camera, but we're only me and you can see that. And I did more tests, and I think that to prove how increasing the ISO of, when you're at high ISOs. This is, I mean, I'm saying yesterday, but obviously this will go out in a few weeks' time. So a few weeks ago, I did a podcast about how once you're at high ISOs that are potentially grainy, increasing the ISO reduces the grain. And I had to figure out how to prove that with a series of images. And I think that is a skill as well, that, the analytic mind, and that goes through to once you're in an inventive sort of experimental space like the ones that you set up, then I think that they're the sort of skills that as photographers can really help us to take the work to the next level.
Creativity is also curiosity, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so a lot of creativity does not yield useful results, and that's okay. And a lot of people will say, okay, well, I had this what if moment. I tried something and it turned into garbage, and I just moved on.
mm,
I'll chalk that up to a failure and just dust yourself off and go on to the next thing. But what you should do is you should look and analyze why
mm,
that didn't work. It's not a failure if you learn from that mistake.
mm.
And so it's kind of that scientist idea where you might have a hypothesis, but you'll publish your paper regardless of if you met your hypothesis or
Yeah,
not. Whatever your results are still valuable,
yes,
and we have to take value within that. And I mentioned that kind of the science side of stuff, and photography has always had a science element to it.
yeah,
Of course, back in the day, it was mathematics and chemistry, in addition to all of the other stuff that we deal with today. But it is still a component. We also have to create something that is beautiful. And what is the definition of beauty? And how do we analyze an image? How do people read photography? How do we see a narrative? How does it become relatable? The psychology of persuasion comes into that to some degree as well.
mm,
And so that's the art side.
mm,
Uh, Photography is its strongest, and some people might argue with me on this one, but it's the strongest when you can take the science and the art and weave them together.
mm.
And that's where the magic really is as photography. It's not just one discipline, it's really two.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that there over the last sort of decade or so, it's been popular or fashionable to try to play down the technical side, and like, or you don't have to have everything perfectly sharp, and you don't have to have
Oh,
this, and you
that
don't.
things aren't perfectly sharp in this image either. I've got sharpness where it counts, but stuff fall out of focus all over the
Yeah,
place.
but I think that if you want, I mean, your B in this is the eye is exactly where the sharpness is, and the rest doesn't need to be, of course. But I think that my point there is that people tend to play down certain things about photography, and half the time it's because it's the difficult part. If you rule out the need for sharpness, then it makes the job of a photographer a lot easier. But I really think that a lot of that is just copying out in many ways, unless the image is obviously about nothing being sharp. And that is an assignment that I give to students sometimes. Nothing sharp is the theme for this photo. Go away and give me and that's a valid thing to do. And yes, I agree that if the guy jumping into the puddle,
Henri
yes,
Cartier-Bresson,
yeah,
the decisive moment.
exactly. I mean, that guy jumping into the puddle is blurry a little bit, but it's still an iconic photo. So
Well, you mentioned the guy jumping into the puddle,
and you
and I
knew
immediately
exactly.
know
Yeah,
the photographer that took it, and it's in my head because it was
exactly.
such a moment, right?
Yeah. And your number of years on me age wise, as in under me age wise, helps you to actually recall the name more quickly.
Well,
um,
but you make a good point there as well, because that image was taken on a camera that we would all consider an antique today.
yeah,
Right? It's not the photographic equipment. And yes, I'm pushing limits with a lot of my work that technology allows me to push further into.
yeah,
But if I was in the film era, I would find the limit pushing element of photography still the most enticing component of it.
mm,
We've always been able to push those limits. We can push them further now.
yeah,
But even 50 years ago, firmly in the film era of photography, we would have so many creative opportunities so long as we were creative individuals.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Excellent stuff. So, Don, let's move on to your next photo. I am looking at this guy here. I've seen these. Do you know the name of this
Of
The
course I do. Off the
beetle,
top of my head, this is a green immigrant leaf weevil.
a leaf weevil. Okay,
Yes.
so
Iridescent green, beautiful little buggers. These things, they're pests in the garden. They'll eat plants that I care about, but
yeah,
they're just so adorable and bumbly that I ended up using them in a number of photographs
yeah.
because they just work so well.
Yeah, I almost picked the third image. I almost picked one of these guys in the water. You have another beautiful photo,
Yeah, yeah.
and I wanted to keep it to three because I know how much we go off the rails or either side of the rails
Oh
on these
yes.
things. But um, tell us more about the photo. I mean, obviously you've got the flower reflecting through the beads of water there and everything. Tell us about how you get into this stuff.
Okay, so water droplet refraction photography is basically where you use a water droplet. The more spherical it is, the better it acts like a lens. As a lens. So
Mm,
you put something in behind. In this case, it is a gazania, but I often use Gerbera daisies or
mm,
any radially symmetrical flower,
mm,
because it's circular and it's flat and it fills in a droplet really nicely.
mm,
So you've got a flower in the background that comes through each of those droplets
mm,
because they are little mini lenses like a crystal ball refracting an image of whatever is on the other side of it. And the key, really, and I can't emphasize this enough, is that they have to be spherical.
yeah.
And not every surface will create a spherical droplet. I found bluegrasses work really well. Spider webs, of course, and in wildflower seeds, that's another really big one. Even a dandelion seed will create very spherical water droplets.
Mm,
In this image, we have a leaf of a plant called a barberry. And by I don't want to say pure accident because I was looking to see. I put my hose in the garden
yeah.
on the mist setting, and I just went around to everything, just seeing what creates spherical droplets when I hit it with a nice fine but overabundant mist.
Mm,
And I discovered a couple of things that day. Lupin flowers, which are very beautiful in their own right,
mm,
when their leaves are young, will create spherical water droplets. And I've made images with that too. But
mm,
that same day, I discovered this barberry leaf idea.
mm.
So that, I'm building the puzzle pieces here. My neighbors had gazanias in their front yard. I never heard of that flower before I saw it in their yard, and I asked them what that was.
Mm.
Okay. And now I know I can maybe steal one if I ask nicely. My wife bakes some cookies once in a while, so it's a fair trade. And uh, and so then I can get that flower easy enough. And now I've got a surface for which I know spherical droplets will show up on.
Yeah.
So that's great. And I've done a lot of water droplet refraction work before. In fact, the cover of the book will feature such an image using a wildflower seed with a daisy-like flower in the background. It's a very iconic and kind of magical feel. But it doesn't have to be just those ingredients.
Yeah.
You can add an actor into this scene. And remember, we were talking about challenges,
Mm.
right? It ends up making it more interesting for me to make it more difficult
Yeah.
because I enjoy the problem solving element of all of this.
Yeah.
So I pick the leaves and the flower, and I'm setting this up on my patio table, just in open shade outside. And I'm setting up the lighting and I'm testing to make sure that the foreground is illuminated, but the background is equal or brighter. And one of the really key ingredients for water droplet refraction photography is that the droplets appear brighter than the surface that they're attached to.
Mm.
And oftentimes that means that the foreground has to be more dimly lit
Yeah.
than the background. Or in this case, these leaves have a very, very dark color to them to begin with. So it works well to make those droplets really pop out.
Mm.
And then enter the weevil. How do I get this little bug to be exactly where you see him? Trial and error for the most part,
Mm.
but they're roughly cooperative. I've done work with ants and other chaotic, very scatterbrained insects before that do not sit still at all.
Mm.
And a weevil, well, I can pick him up from, I forget what bush he was on, but they're all over the place, with a little piece of straw. And he'll climb onto that, and then I walk over to this pre-set up environment that I'm just waiting for this actor to be a part of, and I put him down on that, and he grabs onto the edge of the leaf. My camera's on my camera is not on a tripod for this one. I do a lot of this work handheld because I don't know where he's going to move.
Mm.
He's going to go on the back side, the front side, and I have to work around the subject being the center of the rotation of the camera. If I'm on a tripod, well, the center of that rotation is where the tripod mount is, or if it's a gimbal, it's a bit different. But it's still not conducive to kind of tracking this subject where I've got to rotate around and find different alignments. He's not a fast-moving guy, but I still need to be handheld in order to make sure that I find the right angle to get this to work. And thankfully, he sat pretty for just enough for me to. I think it is a focus stacked image. I'm trying to remember how many images it was. It wasn't more than 6 or 7 photographs. And for those that don't know, focus stacking is where on a macro scale, your depth of field is razor thin.
Yeah.
And the only way to really increase that without sacrificing image quality is to photograph the exact same scene at multiple focus points, which I achieve by physically moving the camera forward and backward ever so slightly in order to make this work. And there are some defects in that. He was still, but his antennas twiddled around a little bit. And so then you have to just kind of make sure that you choose them from one frame and not the others. And there's artifacts that you have to clean up as a result. But that was an adventure in curiosity and frustration. And other attempts of stuff like this that I've done have, I don't want to say failed. There were so many mistakes that the end result was not successful.
But you learn from
the
them, don't you?
The knowledge accrued to finally create this image.
Yeah, amazing.
By the way, this image was made on June 17th. I remember the date very specifically because as soon as I finished editing and posting this image, my wife went into labor. And I have never photographed insects and water droplets again. There hasn't been the time in my life since that moment.
Wow. So yeah, I mean, obviously another beautiful image. The fact that you did focus stacking from while hand holding is obviously impressive in itself. I've done focus stacking. I even walk people through the process in my sharpshooter book, but I have to admit I don't do it a lot because it's one of those things that it takes a bit of setup and you need to be patient with it. But when I do it in the past, I've always done it with macro rails. And
a focusing rail. And I have some very good ones, but it takes time to get that angle set up.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
And time is working against you, not just because that insect. If he was sitting still, I want to try this again this spring, something similar with a praying mantis nymph. The logic with a praying mantis, their modus operandi is they sit still and wait for prey to come to them.
Yeah.
So they will sit still very well.
Yeah.
But even in that scenario, the water droplets will be actively evaporating.
Yeah.
So there's always some element of time to consider.
Yeah. So did this guy not sort of, as he moved around, did he not shake that leaf and disrupt things that way? Is that not an issue?
Well, you can see sort of where his legs are in the foreground. There are no droplets there. That's because he knocked them off.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's okay. I mean, so long as he didn't wander around the entire thing and knock off all the droplets, then I'd have to reset the whole experiment. Put them off to the side somewhere, and spray another leaf and try again and again.
Isn't it cool that some insects, not all, will actually just crawl onto a piece of straw, like you say? I mean, that must be their way of getting around. It's obviously going to be easier to climb onto a cat and let it take you to the next garden than it is.
I mean, this guy has wings. He can fly.
Yeah.
He's just lazy, I guess.
Well, I mean, that's it. It's energy saving, isn't it? It's getting to the next garden via the cat rather than using energy to fly over there.
I suppose so. I never thought of it that way. I have thought of it in certain ways where if you want to get a bee to cooperate, pollinators don't sit still either unless their wings are wet. So if I have my hose on the mist setting or a spray bottle handy, I can get a bee soaking wet, and then it's not going to fly away until it's dry. But I can put that piece of straw next to it, and it's going to grab onto that like a life raft.
Yeah.
and then I'll be able to move him around too. So there's different theories into how all this works, but again, a little bit of inventiveness on your part never
Uh,
hurts.
I've never done it, but I wonder, have you ever chilled an insect to make it lethargic? Like,
I've heard a lot of people doing that, and I tried it as an experiment. It was more of a scientific experiment rather than a photographic one because I wanted to see if a dragonfly would fluoresce. I had found a cicada, which is a very cooperative insect. You can just pick them up, and I put him in my studio or her, and the wings glowed blue like crazy.
yeah.
And so, as more of a scientific experiment, just to see, do the wings of other large winged insects also fluoresce? And some big winged dragonflies do. And then, once I had that set up, I actually took a picture of him before he warmed up enough and started flying around my studio. And then I put him back in the bug net and took him back outside.
Yeah.
But there was a bit of I mean, not a huge number of people, but some people for that image said, no, you should never freeze a bug. I mean, number one, what if you kill it? You could potentially be doing harm to a creature here. I mean, I step on ants all the time outside. It's, I mean, it's not the dominion of mammals or birds here. It is an insect, and so that I draw a line in a different place. But even still, I know that my images are more powerful when they're less manipulated. When I have, I mean, I've completely constructed this image, but it's still a living bug that I didn't put in the freezer. I just moved them into this place, and I think that might add some intrinsic value to the image as a result. And the more of that sort of hidden value that I can get, I think it's better. And so if I can do it without putting bugs in the freezer, that's what I'll do.
Yeah, I was just curious. Like I said, I've never done it myself, but I mean, I will try to avoid harming even insects when possible, and I know that you do. But yeah, it's you can't really
Except,
put it.
I mean, I draw the line at mosquitoes and deer flies and the stuff that attacks me first.
Oh
If you
yeah,
pick a fight, then all bets are out.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. I've no problems with squishing a mosquito as he sucks your blood from your arm or wherever. So let's take a look at this final image with the well, in fact, I was going to let you. I was going to take a guess, and I think I
Oh,
might be
take a
right.
guess. You have to
Well,
now. You set it
I
up.
was thinking maybe it was the kiddies' bubbles from washing liquid. Is
Yep.
is that what it is? And then it
This
started
is
to
a soap
freeze.
bubble.
Yeah. Okay.
That is freezing in winter weather, and it's something that I've done a lot of.
Mm,
And it's one of those things where if you create a bubble that is freezing outside, I mean, you have to have a number of conditions for that. You have to have between -8 and -20 Celsius weather. You might be able to get beyond those extremes, but that's where I play with absolutely no wind outside. Because if you have any wind, these things will shatter so quickly.
Yeah.
So a nice calm, cold winter's eve, you can go outside and blow some bubbles. Now, the bubbles have to have a different recipe, however. The recipe that I typically use is 6 parts water, 2 parts dish soap, and that would create a regular bubble mixture for the most part.
Yeah.
So 6 parts water, 2 parts dish soap. And the secret ingredient, which is not a secret because I found it online, that's how I started doing this, is 1 part white corn syrup.
Oh wow.
And the white corn syrup thickens the bubble. So if you're blowing the bubble from a straw, which took me a few years to realize that don't use a bubble wand, just use a drinking straw. It gives you far more control. So you use a drinking straw, you blow the bubble, and the white corn syrup will pool on the bottom of the bubble so that when you place it down somewhere, it does not pop on impact. It acts like a cushion.
Oh wow.
So that's step number 1. Okay, and then you can get the freezing soap bubble to appear on snow or any other things you can find outside, and that's great. That works, and you can have some success with that. But it kind of gets tired after a while. Okay, well, there's another freezing soap bubble on snow with all these different little almost snowflake-like puzzle pieces about to connect together. It's beautiful. Don't get me wrong, and I love shooting that stuff, but it doesn't evolve much unless you start to change the ingredients at play. A freezing soap bubble on snow will always be just that. Just like a sunset is a sunset is a sunset. I've seen a million of them, and if I see another one, it's not going to be any different no matter how beautiful that it is. So I started experimenting. Asking that what if question again. Just that point of discovery. Well, what if I photographed them on crystal? I put some quartz crystals outside and I tried that and it worked really nicely. Everything was cold. The crystal had acclimated to the outside temperature and it worked. A branch from my Christmas tree, because I missed the deadline to have it hauled off by the garbage people. So it was hanging out in my garage. So I tried that too and that worked. But I mean, those things, I mean, you can find outside in the cold, possibly. So I thought to think to warmer climes, and I took a Gerbera daisy that I was using indoors for some water droplet photography at the time. And it lived its life for that. Those experiments were over, but I still had the flower. What if I put that flower outside, let it cool down to the temperatures that a bubble can freeze on top of? So it's maybe like leaving it outside for a half an hour, 45 minutes, and then try to place a bubble in the heart of this flower. That's the idea. And I had some roses as well. The roses didn't work nearly as well. It didn't have the same dynamic, not the same character. So you move on to the next thing. And the first bubbles didn't freeze properly. And again, this is a problem-solving challenge every step of the way. So the bubbles didn't freeze properly. So you can't see it from the angle. It's hidden. You can't see the center of the flower. The center of the flower, I've sprinkled some tiny bits of snow in there to help the nucleation of the crystal start right in the center of the flower, to start the freezing process much more dynamically than the flower would otherwise allow for. Now, normally these images are lit with a single light, and that's coming from behind through the bubble, but just off center so that you don't see it in the background. So it's further away. In these cases, I can even refocus the light using a Fresnel lens, also called a sheet magnifier, as one of the ingredients here, because a flashlight from a distance is going to be spreading out. Yeah. And so if you can capture that and force it back down, your light is more intense and focused. And they cost like $10. It's not an expensive thing to have in your backyard photo kit. But in this case, I also needed to light the flower as well. So there's a second light that is coming in underneath, lighting up some of the details of the flower so that it's not all in silhouette. And so these are just really bright LED flashlights that's lighting this. And you can't focus stack this because it's moving and changing so fast that the crystals in the bubble, I'm shooting as fast as I can on high speed, continuous, and every image is going to be slightly different. And you choose one where everything just gels together. Yeah. You've got enough contrast between the pieces. They're not all connected together yet, but you'll fill your camera buffer and take hundreds of photographs to get just the right one for something like this.
Wow. That's another. I mean, there's a book right there, just in this one flower.
Well, I could write 100 pages on these 3 images alone, right?
You could. It's amazing. I love looking at them, and I think that obviously they're, actually earlier. Are we missing one part? Can you run through the parts again? I thought you said like it added up to 9 parts. Let's just tell us once more. What do you have? You had. How many parts of soap?
Okay, so no, it's 6 parts water and 2 parts dish soap and 1 part white corn syrup. So you're right, it does add up to 9. Yeah. I typically mix them in 100 ml per one, so that I get like almost a liter worth of bubble fluid, 900 mils. And you don't need that much. You need a tenth of that, really. But if I have that much, I put it in a giant glass jar or mug outside, and the volume of the bubble fluid means that it will freeze more slowly. And so if I'm out there for the long haul, because these experiments can take me hours to figure out all the right ingredients, my bubble solution stays warm enough that it doesn't freeze before I can start blowing the bubbles.
I've got you. That's the non-academic in me coming out. I was thinking that we needed to get to 10, but 9 parts is fine. It's like
exactly. So long as you've got, if it was without the white corn syrup, it would be 3 parts water and 1 part dish soap. Yeah, you don't need to get to 100. There.
Yeah, that was me having I was going to say brain whatever, but I probably don't want to add the extra time needed to bleep that out. So, Don, these are just so beautiful, and honestly, if both of us had the time, and I know that the listeners would have the patience, especially if we split it up, we could probably talk about 10 more, but let's leave it there, because it's obviously a great introduction into the mind of Don Komarechka, and how much detail you put into and thought you put into your work. How long have you been working as you've been doing your photography? I know that we've been talking for many years now. How long is it since you've actually been doing this professionally?
I basically say the start of my professional career was January 11th of 2009. And that's where I made an image that I call Maple Leaf Flag. It is a series of red maple leaves that I'd preserved months earlier in the fall, placed on a bed of freshly fallen snow on a sunny morning in the shape of the Canadian flag.
Yeah.
Being Canadian, that was a rather iconic idea of mine. And the moment I saw that take place, I realized that this image could be the start of a career.
Yeah.
And it was within a year that a sizable amount of my income was from photography. And within 2 years that it was my sole income. So that was the impetus of it.
So that's just over 10 years ago now. And that's actually around the time I quit my day job. So we've both been probably coming up against the same struggles and the same exciting things as well. And it's
in a changing industry, which is just, I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But to be riding that wave and to be creative, to be a photo educator. I mean, you and I both do workshops, and I present to camera clubs and conferences and all that. But to be 100% transparent about my work, hold no secrets back, share everything, I find a certain joy about that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially in macro photography. Yeah, you want to take all of my secrets. I mean, they're not secrets, but you want to take all of my knowledge and technique and ideas and try it yourself. Yeah. Go for it. I mean, that's why I'm writing this book, so that you would have all of that knowledge. And then I go on to do the next thing, because there's always more ideas to explore. That's a nonstop thing.
Yeah, and I mean that in many ways, that's how I managed to springboard myself into this life, by starting the podcast and just sharing stuff. And I remember that 14 years ago, coming up to 15 years ago, when I started it, some people emailed me saying, why are you giving away all of your secrets? And I'm like, well, think about it. How many of the things that I am doing are really secret? I learned them from somewhere, or I invented them based on knowledge that I've acquired through one means or another. And a lot of it's from the greater sort of photography, I don't know, the force of photography.
We stand on the shoulders of giants.
Exactly. Mark. So, I mean, I think that there's a certain amount of, having put the amount of work that I do into my podcast, my wife sometimes says to me, even after 14, 15 years, I can't believe you're still doing this for free. But when you think that it's enabled me to do so much, it really isn't free. I'm getting back for what I do. And I know that that's exactly how you're working as well.
If I go back to my first book, and I kind of want to end on this point, is I will write, anybody that follows me on social media, and hopefully we'll put the links in the show notes for this too. But if you follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Flickr, I'm active on about 5 different platforms. You'll see a full written page of text where it's easy for me to paste that in, like on Facebook, for every image describing the subject or the technique, or just I kind of cut myself off at a page because I know we're in the too long didn't read internet era. But all of this has been given away for free. It started with my snowflake work, where I decided to bring up an audience by posting one snowflake every single day for 100 days, starting on December 1st every year.
I remember that, yeah.
And that was the most exhausting project I've ever done, and I still do it in a slightly scaled down way. But I had built an audience on that, and I realized that now I have not only a body of work in terms of the imagery, but a body of content in terms of writing.
Yeah.
What happens if I bind that up, reword it, reorganize it, and everything else, mind you? But what if I take what I've given away for free and ask people to pay for?
Yeah.
And they did.
Yeah.
So the same thing is happening again. All of the knowledge that I have, I've given away in all of my posts, and you're free to go and read them all and absorb that on your own, or pick up a copy of Macro Photography, The Universe at Our Feet, and that will be available through crowdfunding with all of the details to come, because it hasn't launched yet as we record this, but it will be active when this airs. So please, if I could have everybody's support, if you like the kind of stuff that I do and you want to help fund more of this mad scientist attitude while dipping your toe into the waters yourself, then that is my plea.
Yeah. So just for the sake of the listeners, what I will do is I will contact Don before I release this, and I'm going to be in Namibia when this goes out. So it might not be the smoothest release, but I will make sure I get the links from Don before I do that. And when it goes out, you'll be able to go to the post. But also, I'm sure if people go, is it doncom.ca?
If you go to doncom.ca, you'll find my website, and all the links to the stuff that I'm up to, including that book project, will be easy to find from there when that campaign is active.
Yeah, so that's DONKOM. Doncom.
Yep.
Yeah, KOM. So
if you goof up and you put in doncom.com, that'll get you there too.
Oh,
but .ca, I mean, being Canadian, I want to keep that domain there.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, very patriotic of you, and I think it's. I mean, as you said, that photo that you did, that is iconic. I think you still have that in your email footers, don't you?
I do. It's one of my signature pieces, and it's one of the reasons. I mean, I could get this book printed in China, and it would cost me a lot less. But I want it to be printed in Canada. I want to fly to the print house and be there on press as it's coming off the press, and so there is a certain bit of pride there. But I know that these guys are going to do it right. And Martin, thank you so much for having me on this episode. It's been a blast as always.
Yeah, not at all. Absolutely likewise. I don't want to keep you any longer, so we will drop off now. But really, thank you, Don. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that we get to do this again soon. Maybe don't leave it quite as long as we have done between these two, especially as I keep jumping on your show as well. So just a quick reminder. So Photo Geek Weekly, great show. Don does a great job to bring in his passion and his geekiness to his own podcast. So check that out as well. So really, Don, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, Martin. Thank you so much.
That was a lot of fun. I always enjoy talking with Don Komarechka. Please do visit the blog at mbp.ac/664 to comment or to get the links or view the photographs that we've talked about today. So by the time I release this podcast, I'll actually be in Namibia, in Walvis Bay, enjoying the flamingos with my guests. And I am probably going to not be able to record anything while I'm traveling. I was too busy to put an extra episode in the feed before I left, so it'll be about another 10 days before you hear from me. But I will be back from Namibia by then and have some great work hopefully to show you. So stay tuned, and I'll see you on the flip side. Thanks very much for listening today. If you enjoy this podcast, please share a link with your friends. Subscribe in iTunes or your favorite podcast program to ensure uninterrupted delivery. If you have a moment to rate the podcast or leave us a review in iTunes, that helps to keep us relevant in the huge number of podcasts out there now. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, etc. And links to everything that I'm up to are at martinbaileyphotography.com, so do drop by and take a look. I'll be back in about 10 days with another episode, but in the meantime, you take care and have a great week, whatever you're doing. Bye-bye.